The Romano estate glittered that night, gold chandeliers, laughter, and the scent of wealth filling the air. Isabella had attended dozens of her father's business parties before, but this one felt different. Maybe it was the way everyone grew silent when he arrived. Dominic Moretti, her father's best friend. The man whispered about in every dark corner of New York. The one they called the Mafia King. He entered in a tailored black suit, his presence alone commanding the room. His cold eyes swept across the crowd, calculating, detached, until they landed on her. For a heartbeat, Isabella forgot to breathe. Her pulse quickened. He wasn't supposed to look at her like that. Not when he was her father's closest ally. Not when he was twice her age. Yet, under the shimmering lights, his gaze lingered, slow, deliberate, as if he saw through the glitter, straight into her thoughts. When her father greeted him with a brotherly hug, Dominic's voice was smooth but lethal. "Happy birthday, Carlo. You still managed to survive another year." Laughter followed, but his eyes flicked back to Isabella, softer now, curious. She quickly turned away, pretending to sip her champagne. Her heart didn't stop racing. Later, she caught him standing alone on the terrace, cigarette glowing faintly between his fingers. The night air was cold, his scent intoxicating, a mix of danger and control. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he murmured without turning. Her breath hitched. "Neither should you." He finally faced her, the ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. "You're not afraid of me?" She met his gaze, her voice trembling but brave. "Maybe I should be." For the first time, his expression softened, not like a man meeting a child, but a man realizing he was already too close to the edge. That night, under the moonlight, Isabella felt something awaken, something that should never have been touched. And Dominic knew even then that she would be his greatest sin. The morning after the party, the Romano mansion buzzed with rumors. The staff whispered about how Dominic Moretti had left early, his expression unreadable. But Isabella couldn't stop replaying that look in his eyes, that silent connection no one else saw. Her father noticed. At breakfast, Carlo Romano's voice cut through the quiet. "Dominic's too close to this family." His tone was calm, but his stare burned through her. "Stay away from him, Isabella." She froze, her spoon clinking against the cup. "Why would I?" "Because he's not a man you play with," her father interrupted. "He's my business partner. My friend. But he's dangerous. Understand?" She nodded, but her heart whispered a different truth. That evening she saw Dominic again at her father's office. He was all control and power, leaning against the polished desk as he discussed shipments and alliances. His gaze flicked to her briefly, but he didn't speak. Not until her father stepped out to take a call. Then, in the heavy silence, Dominic spoke without looking up. "Your father's right. You shouldn't be near me." Isabella folded her arms, her voice trembling with defiance. "Then why did you look at me like that last night?" He finally turned, eyes dark as storm clouds. "Because I made a mistake." She took a step closer. "And if you make it again?" His jaw clenched. For a moment the mask slipped, revealing hunger, guilt, and something deeper. Then, in a low voice that made her skin burn, he said, "Then I won't stop." Before she could respond, her father returned. Dominic straightened, his expression hard again, untouchable. "Carlo will continue this later," he said, and brushed past her without another glance. But as he walked away, Isabella saw it, the slightest hesitation, the faintest look over his shoulder. A silent promise. A dangerous one. 3 days passed. 3 endless, restless days since he'd walked away. Isabella told herself she'd forget him, that the feeling was a fleeting crush. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Dominic's gaze, heard his voice, felt that quiet danger in his presence. So when her father asked her to deliver signed documents to Dominic's mansion, she didn't hesitate. She told herself it was just business. The Moretti estate was everything his reputation promised: dark marble, armed guards, and silence heavy with power. A butler led her through endless hallways until she stood before a set of double doors. He was inside, sleeves rolled up, papers spread across a grand desk. The sight of him, so composed, so ruthless, made her forget how to breathe. "Your father sent these," she said, placing the folder down. Her voice came out softer than she intended. Dominic didn't look up right away. "You shouldn't be here alone." "Why?" she asked quietly. "Afraid of me?" That made him look up. Their eyes locked, her defiance against his restraint. "I'm afraid of what happens when you look at me like that," he said, his tone low, dangerous. She took a step forward. "Then stop looking." "You didn't? Couldn't?" The silence between them stretched, the air thick with tension. Then a loud crack of thunder shook the mansion, the sky opening into a heavy storm. The butler appeared. "Sir, the roads are flooding. Miss Romano should stay until it clears." Dominic dismissed him with a nod, his eyes never leaving hers. "Guest rooms down the hall," he murmured. But Isabella didn't move. "You don't want me here, do you?" He exhaled sharply, pushing back from his desk. "That's the problem," he said, standing close enough that she could feel his breath. When lightning flashed outside, she caught the conflict in his eyes, power and desire warring in silence. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "Temptation looks a lot like you." And for the first time, Dominic Moretti looked like a man about to break every rule he'd ever made. Rain hammered against the windows, lightning flickering through the mansion like flashes of warning. The storm had cut power across the city, leaving only the glow of the fireplace and the sound of Isabella's heartbeat echoing in her chest. She paced the guest room, restless, her reflection trembling in the glass. She shouldn't have come. She shouldn't have stayed. But every instinct told her he was near, and she wanted him to be. A soft knock. Then his voice. "Isabella." She turned. Dominic stood at the doorway, jacket gone, shirt slightly undone, the image of power undone by conflict. "The storm's worse than expected," he said quietly. "You'll stay until morning." She nodded, trying to steady her breath. "You don't trust yourself, do you?" His jaw tightened. "It's not about trust." "Then what is it?" she asked, stepping closer. "Because every time you look at me it feels like—" He caught her wrist, stopping her words. His touch was firm but trembling, his eyes dark and searching. "Don't," he whispered. "You don't know what you're asking for." But she did. She'd known since the night of the party. "Then show me," she breathed. For a long, dangerous second he didn't move. Then something inside him snapped. He pulled her closer, rough, desperate, as if fighting himself and losing. Their lips met in a collision of fire and restraint, a kiss that tasted like everything they both feared and wanted. The world outside vanished, just rain, heat, and his breath against her skin. When he finally pulled away, his chest rose and fell sharply, eyes filled with regret and hunger. "This can't happen again," he said, voice rough. But even as he said it, his hand still lingered at her waist, his thumb tracing slow circles like he couldn't let go. And Isabella, breathless and trembling, whispered the truth neither wanted to face. "It already has." Outside, thunder rolled, like the world itself warning them both that nothing would ever be the same again. The morning after the storm, Isabella woke to sunlight cutting through the curtains, and an empty room. Dominic was gone. Only the faint scent of his cologne lingered in the air, teasing her with what had happened and what shouldn't have. By the time she returned home, her father was pacing the living room, fury written across his face. "Where were you?" he demanded. "There was a storm, Dominic's place was closest," she said quickly. Carlo froze. The name alone was enough to shift the air. "Dominic?" he repeated, eyes narrowing. "You stayed with him?" She swallowed hard. It wasn't like that. But the lie burned on her tongue. That night she received a message from an unknown number. "You were followed home. Don't go anywhere alone." Her stomach turned cold. Outside her window, a black car idled. For the first time she realized what it meant to be close to a man like Dominic Moretti. The next day his driver appeared outside her university gates. No questions, no words, just a quiet order to follow. He took her to Dominic's private office downtown. Dominic stood by the window, his expression unreadable, but his voice was low and sharp. "My enemies watch me. Now they watch you." "Because of what happened?" she whispered. He turned, eyes locking on hers. "Because you mean something I can't afford to lose." Her breath caught. The walls around them felt too small, the world outside too loud. "Then tell me what's going on," she pleaded. He hesitated. "You don't belong in my world, Isabella. I've killed men for less than what they tried to do to you last night." Her heart pounded. "And if I don't care?" He stepped closer, voice rough with warning. "Then you're going to get hurt." She met his stare, fearless despite the fear twisting inside her. "Maybe you already did," she said softly. And in that moment Dominic knew, protecting her wasn't enough anymore. He'd already claimed her in ways he couldn't undo. Rumors spread faster than bullets in their world. It started with whispers, the Mafia King seen with the Romano heiress, a girl too young, too innocent, too off-limits. Within days it reached her father. Carlo Romano stormed into Dominic's office, his fury barely contained. "Tell me it's not true," he hissed. Tell me you're not touching my daughter. Dominic didn't flinch. He sat behind his desk, composed, every inch the ruthless boss he was. You're hearing gossip, he said evenly. But his silence when pressed further spoke louder than words ever could. Carlos slammed his fist on the desk. She's family, Dominic. She trusted you. I trusted you. Dominic's jaw tightened. You know I'd never hurt her. You already did, Carlos spat, storming out. Isabella watched from the hallway, her heart breaking at the sound of her father's voice. The man she loved and the man she shouldn't, tearing each other apart over her. Later that night, she found Dominic standing by the balcony of his penthouse, the city lights burning below. He didn't turn when she entered. You told him, she said quietly. He already knew, he replied. He just needed to hear me deny it. She stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm. And you didn't. No, he said, eyes dark. I couldn't. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that carried both guilt and truth. Do you regret it? She asked. He looked at her then, eyes soft but unguarded. Every second I touch you feels like sin, but no, Isabella. I don't regret you. Tears welled in her eyes. Then what happens now? He exhaled slowly. Now I protect you from the world I dragged you into, and from your father if I have to. She stared at him, the weight of his words sinking deep. You'd go to war for me? His lips curved into a faint, broken smile. For you I'd burn empires. And as the night stretched on, Isabella realized the truth. Love wasn't the danger anymore. It was the only thing keeping them alive. The war began quietly. Dominic tried to shield her. More guards, more secrecy, more lies, but the streets always talk. Enemies who couldn't reach him found another way to hurt him. Isabella was on her way home from university when it happened. A van screeched to a halt, masked men emerging like shadows. She barely had time to scream before a rough hand covered her mouth and the world went black. Hours later, Dominic's phone buzzed. A photo. Isabella, bound, bruised, terrified, with a message below it. You took what's not yours. Now we take her. For a moment he said nothing. His men watched in silence as he placed the phone down. Then, with terrifying calm, he ordered, find them. The calm didn't last long. By nightfall the city bled. Dominic tore through safe houses, interrogated rival bosses, and left chaos in his wake. His eyes were colder than death, his voice steady as he gave commands that silenced every protest. When his right-hand man hesitated, Dominic snapped, they touched her. There's no mercy for that. Meanwhile, Isabella woke in a dim warehouse, wrists raw, throat dry. She thought of her father, of Dominic, of every choice that led her here. And for the first time, fear didn't paralyze her, it fueled her. She fought the ropes until her wrists bled. The sound of footsteps echoed, and then a gunshot. One. Then two. Silence. A door slammed open and there he was. Dominic stood in the doorway, shirt blood-stained, gun still smoking. His chest rose and fell sharply as his gaze met hers, relief, rage, and something far more dangerous burning there. He cut her free, his voice low and shaking. Did they touch you? She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. I knew you'd come. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her lip as if to make sure she was real. You're mine to protect, Isabella. Always. Behind them, sirens wailed in the distance, but he didn't move. In that moment, Dominic didn't care about empires or blood. Only her. The night he rescued her, Dominic took Isabella to a safe house outside the city. One of his hidden sanctuaries surrounded by silence and forest. The world was still spinning from what he'd done. Every rival gang now knew the truth. The Mafia King had a weakness. And her name was Isabella Romano. She sat on the couch, wearing his oversized shirt, trembling as the weight of it all hit her. You killed for me, she whispered. Dominic stood by the window, shoulders tense, blood still drying on his hands. I've killed for less, he said quietly. But this time, it felt different. She rose, walking toward him. Different how? He turned then, his control finally cracking. Because I wasn't protecting a deal or an empire. I was protecting you. Her breath hitched. Why? He laughed bitterly. You really don't see it, do you? I tried to stay away. I told myself you were off limits. But every time I close my eyes, it's your face I see. Isabella's heart pounded. She stepped closer until only inches separated them. Then stop fighting it, she whispered. Dominic's jaw tightened, his voice rough. You don't understand what being with me means. You'll lose everything, your father, your peace, maybe even your life. She reached up, touching his face gently. You're worth the chaos, Dominic. For a moment silence filled the room, thick, trembling, electric. Then he caught her hand, pressed it against his chest where his heart beat violently. "I don't deserve you," he said. "Then let me decide that," she breathed. And with that, his restraint shattered completely. He pulled her in, kissing her with the desperation of a man who'd been holding back for far too long. It wasn't gentle. It was raw, real, and full of everything they could no longer hide: pain, passion, and the kind of love that destroyed men like him. When they finally broke apart, breathless, he whispered against her lips, "I tried to stay away, Isabella. But I can't. You're mine." And she whispered back, tears falling softly, "Then let the world burn." The sun hadn't yet risen when the world around them began to fall apart. Dominic's men had found a leak. Someone close had betrayed him, selling information about Isabella's whereabouts. The betrayal hit like a knife to the chest, because the name whispered in the report was one he never expected. Carlo Romano. Her father. Dominic refused to believe it at first. But then the call came. Carlo's voice was cold, strained. "Return my daughter," he said. "Before I do what I have to." "You sent men to take her," Dominic growled. "They could have killed her. She was never yours to protect." Carlo roared. "You crossed a line, Dominic. She's my blood." Silence followed, the kind that comes before something breaks. When the call ended, Dominic's hand was shaking. He turned to Isabella, who had heard every word. Her face had gone pale. "My father," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "He tried to have me taken?" Dominic closed the distance between them, his voice low but steady. "He's afraid. He thinks he's losing you, to me." "You didn't force me," she said fiercely. "I chose this. I chose you." He looked at her like she was both his salvation and his ruin. And now the cost of that choice is war. That night, Dominic gathered his men. The city's underworld buzzed with tension. Guns were loaded, alliances tested, blood already promised to the streets. But when the first shots echoed across the docks, Dominic's mind wasn't on vengeance, it was on her. Somewhere between the chaos, Carlo's men cornered Isabella. Dominic fought through the gunfire, bullets slicing through the dark until he reached her, and her father standing between them, gun raised. "Step away from my daughter," Carlo shouted. Dominic's voice broke through the smoke. "You pull that trigger, you don't just lose your daughter, you lose everything." The standoff stretched in silence. One heartbeat. Then another. A gunshot rang out. And when the smoke cleared, nothing would ever be the same again. The city smoldered in the aftermath. Fires burned in alleyways, sirens wailed in the distance, and the night sky was streaked with smoke. Dominic stood on the rooftop of his mansion, bloodied but unbroken, Isabella pressed against him. They had survived betrayal, bullets, and a world that wanted to tear them apart. But survival came with scars, physical, emotional, and the kind that never fully heal. Isabella looked up at him, rain dripping from her hair. "Is it over?" she whispered. Dominic's hand brushed a wet strand from her face. "For now," he said. "But nothing in my world is ever truly safe." Her eyes met his, unwavering. "Then let it all burn. I'm not leaving you." He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. "You were always forbidden, my desire, my weakness. I tried to stay away. I failed." She traced the scars on his face with trembling fingers. "And yet you protected me." A small, almost imperceptible smile curved his lips. "And I always will." They stood together as the city below writhed in chaos, knowing that love had come at a price too high for most to understand. Yet in the ashes there was beauty, their love raw and unbroken, a defiance against everything the world tried to take. Dominic lowered his lips to hers, slow and deliberate, a kiss that sealed promises and confessions. This wasn't just passion. It was survival. It was ownership, consent, and surrender all at once. Pulling back slightly, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion, "You're mine, Isabella. Always have been. Always will be." She smiled, tears blending with rain. "And you're mine. Even if the world hates it. Even if my father does." For the first time, Dominic allowed himself to truly exhale. The war would continue, enemies would rise, and the city would never forgive him. But none of it mattered. Not as long as she was in his arms. And in that moment, high above the burning streets, they weren't just survivors. They were lovers. They were fire. They were unstoppable.